This is GPS, the Global Public Square. Welcome to all of you in the United States and around the world. I'm Farid Zakaria. We have a wonderful show today. Nouriel Roubini, Neil Ferguson, and Mortimer Zuckerman tell us whether the recession is over. The most powerful woman in France, Christine Lagarde, brings a European perspective to all this. But first, Iran. This was a week marked by no big events, protests, explosions. But there's much stirring beneath the surface. The most striking aspect is an opposition movement that refuses to be silenced. Ali Akbar Rafsanjani, the former president, currently head of an important constitutional body, has called for the release of all those imprisoned for political reasons. That, by the way, would include the friend of this program, the respected Newsweek reporter Maziar Bahari, who is in jail. Then Mohammad Khatami, another two-term president, called for a referendum on the country's leaders. Meanwhile, the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and the country's president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, are battling over an appointment. Finally, Mir Hussein Mousavi, the candidate who might actually have won the June presidential elections, has announced that he is going to create a large-scale social movement to oppose the government. What does all this mean? It's very hard to say from the outside, but clearly there is a bitter contestation for power taking place in Tehran. The stakes are very high. It does not appear that the regime has lost any of its grip on the repressive backbone of its power, the military, the Revolutionary Guard, and the paramilitary, the Basij. But the theocratic facade is clearly cracking. That's why Ahmadinejad can dare defy the supreme leader. In fact, a leading Iranian paper allied with the opposition now refers to Khamenei as merely the leader of Iran, having dropped the prefix supreme. This might seem like a small sign, but imagine if one day Vatican newspapers stopped calling the Pope His Holiness. We'll speak about all of this to our guest from Tehran, a prominent Iranian academic, often seen as allied with the regime. It's been very difficult to speak with anyone on the ground inside Iran, so this is a rare opportunity. Let's get started. Joining me now from Tehran is Syed Mohammad Marandi. He is a professor of North American Studies at Tehran University. Professor Marandi, welcome.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, Professor, how do we make sense of what is going on in Iran right now? The only way in which the regime has been able to maintain its control is to use fairly tough methods, brutal methods of repression. It has used the Basij, it is using the Revolutionary Guard, it is arresting people, it is arresting journalists. This is not what the Islamic Republic of Iran presents to the world as the basis of its regime. It is turning into a military dictatorship, is it not?
Since Mr. Mousavi's people went to the streets day after day, it was causing trouble in the city of Tehran. So the police really felt that they had to bring things back to normal. Mr. Mousavi took people to the streets in the heart of Tehran, where businesses were severely disrupted and damaged. Ordinary people were hurt, and he did it on a daily basis. And on the other hand, I think that Mr. Ahmadinejad was provocative in his victory speech after the election. But I think that as things settle down and the two sides become more level-headed and less emotional, the supporters of both gentlemen, I think things will return back to normal.
But they are not normal. Mr. Mousavi's brother-in-law is in jail. Many of his supporters are in jail. He is under effective house arrest. You're making this out like a normal disputed election where people are now happily reconciled. But you still have, on one side, the use of the Basij, the Revolutionary Guard, house arrests, real arrests. This is, as I say, this has become a military clampdown and a military dictatorship, has it not?
No, again, I don't agree, because if you go on the streets of Tehran, things are very normal. I mean, you can walk around town. You can walk around
North Korea as well, Professor Marandi.
I think you also have to keep in mind the fact that some of the measures taken by the security forces have to do with the fact that there has been a lot of interference from outside the country. Right now you have almost 40 television channels in Persian being broadcast into Iran from the United States and Europe, basically funded by the American government and European governments, or in some cases owned, which have played a very negative role over the past few weeks, turning people against one another. This sort of behavior and this sort of funding coming from the United States and its European allies really does not serve their interests.
Professor Marandi, you can't possibly expect us to believe that. Here you have a two-term president of Iran, Rafsanjani, calling for opposition to the regime. A two-term prime minister of Iran, Mr. Mousavi, calling for the creation of an opposition movement. A two-term president, Khatami, calling for a referendum. You have people under house arrest. You have major clerics in Qom asking that Ahmadinejad's election be boycotted. Are you telling me all these people are doing this at the bidding of the United States? Surely you must realize that that's kind of a ludicrous claim.
Well, that's not exactly what I said. What I was saying...
Those are the people who are asking people to go out on the streets, not President Obama. It is a president, all right. It just happens to be President Khatami and Rafsanjani, not President Obama.
What I've been saying was that when external forces and governments outside of Iran interfere in a country's internal affairs, it only makes matters worse and it only creates further tensions. I think it's extraordinary that the United States allows itself to beam in tens of television channels or fund television channels that beam into the country, and in many cases they call for riots and they call for violence.
Do you worry that you will be seen in history as a mouthpiece for a dying repressive regime in its death throes, that 20 years from now you'll look back and the world will look back at you the way it did some of those smooth-talking, English-speaking Soviet spokesmen who were telling us right, you know, in the middle 1980s that the Soviet Union was all just fine and democratic and wonderful?
Well, Farid, I am an academic at the University of Tehran, and I would be very surprised to know that Mr. Ahmadinejad would be supportive of me, because I've always been a critic of his administration, but I think it is my duty to be honest. And if he has won the election, I will have to accept the results. Just like when Mr. Hugo Chavez wins elections in Venezuela, I think the people who oppose him have to accept the results. And also, I think that if we look back in my own personal history, I was a volunteer in the Iraq-Iran war when Iraq invaded Iran, and I survived 2 chemical attacks by the Iraqi regime, and those chemical weapons were provided to Iraq's, to Saddam Hussein by the European Union countries and the United States. They provided
you know that that's not true. You hesitated there, Mr. Professor Marandi, because you know it is not true that the United States provided any...
The technology and the support...
You're trying to come up with some way to formulate it.
Saddam Hussein with support.
With agricultural credits. They did not provide them with chemical
you know
weapons.
That the United States did back Saddam. You know that the United States did back Saddam Hussein.
I said very clearly it provided agricultural credits. Though that's not chemical weapons. These are 2 separate things.
Well, I think history has shown that the United States did back Saddam Hussein at a time when he was carrying out brutal measures against the people, his own people, and the people of Iran. And I'm a survivor of those 2 attacks. But at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is a more realistic understanding of Iran in the United States in order for rapprochement to begin. And if people in the United States, if politicians in the United States do not wish to understand the reality on the ground in Iran, then there will not be an opportunity for the 2 sides to sit together and to resolve their issues.
Thank you very much, Professor Marandi. I will only point out to you and to our viewers that one sign that the regime looks very favorably upon you is it is almost impossible to get anybody from Tehran and to be allowed to do so on an open satellite link.
Farid,
we have tried very hard.
Me.
That's my point, but it is very hard to get the satellite links through in Iran, and the fact
that
a lot
of people,
that you are allowed
don't
to do
trust
this,
the Western media.
Well, my point stands.
A lot of people here don't trust the Western media. They think it's biased.
I would love
rightly
to talk
or wrongly.
I would love to talk to Prime Minister Mousavi, President Khatami, or President Rafsanjani, but alas, we are not allowed to speak to them.
Well, that's
the only person we are allowed to speak to is you.
But you can speak to my colleagues at the University of Tehran, and you can speak to my students. Hopefully, if you get a visa one of these days, you can come.
Which I have applied for several times and have never gotten.
And you'll see that it's a very different world from the one that you believe it to be.
I anxiously await the day I will be granted a visa to Tehran. It has not happened yet. Thank you very much,
if you think that I'm somehow the mouth of Sauron, I think you're mistaken.
Thank you.